mentioned traumas, and a lot of people have a hard time identifying what truly classifies as trauma because sometimes dealing with bad things are so normal that you don't even understand that you've actually touched the gates of hell and came back with pitches, right? So,
Yeah,
even when you talk about Lamar Odom, he always had this stigma about being this unhinged individual, but when you get to know more about what happened to him, he survived a lot of
yeah.
terrible things and still had to soldier on like everything was okay. So if you had to break trauma down to someone who maybe not realize that they have experienced that, how would you
Yeah.
classify that?
Yeah, interesting. I think that's so, interesting because there's, kind of like I always say, my worst trauma is pretty close to whatever your worst trauma is for you, And so, maybe mine wasn't the loss of my mother or something like you or Lamar have had in this time, but like, my losses or my, things that didn't go the way I wanted them to go, they feel I can imagine that they're in the range of what everybody else's trauma is. So it's like we all have that. And I think coming out of the pandemic and going through 2 years of, that type of uncertainty and isolation and, everything that you go through, I think everybody has some level of PTSD right now. And that might not have been the case 2 years ago, but I think right now, all of us have had some of those moments that, it's not that we want to like wipe them out of our mind like they didn't happen, but the plant medicine has this opportunity to kind of change the electrical charge on them. So when you think about it or you're reminded, it doesn't like trigger you in some way. It's just like, you know, something that happened, but you have these, really new neural pathways that have been built around those patterns. So you're not, processing everything through those patterns. And I would say that, we as human beings, we are, you know, we're ancient, we are basically like a scanning mechanism, like always scanning for danger. Somebody opens the door, all of a sudden you look over, a bird flies by, like it's like you're just scanning. And I think back like a long time ago when we were very tribal, that probably made sense. Somebody was coming along and you look and they're different and you go, okay, danger and no danger, But now we're living in this society, we're all connected. We need to be, a unit. And it's not right that we're like, still this scanning mechanism doing the same types of calculations on danger. And I find that the plant medicine, the psychedelics, they allow you to like transcend your human filter. And
Mm-hmm.
then you get out of that and you're like, oh, wow, I'm looking at this in a different way. I'm looking at this, like maybe the universe would look at it. And you're not in that scanning mechanism mode. And so when you step out of that, even if it's just one time for an hour or 5 hours or something like that, when you come back into life, it's so beautiful and you feel so recharged because you don't have that same scanning mechanism happening at the same, level and speed that it was happening. So I think I used to, people say, is plant medicine for everybody? And I'd be like, yeah, no, and not everybody. But now I'm saying post pandemic, I feel like it might be for everybody right now.
Yeah, even at a microdose level. And there's so much to unpack here. So even going back to what you were saying about ketamine, because the examples that I've always heard of ketamine, it's hard to kick, but these are people who are not doing it under the aid of a doctor with the assistance of a shaman or anything like that. How do you know that microdosing, what is typically been considered harder drugs or like more, more on the edgier side of psychedelics, how do you know when it's time for you to try that as a alternative?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ketamine's an interesting one because it kind of has this a strange folklore to it because it's used in clubs a lot, But what happens is when you use ketamine on the street in a club or something, you're snorting it. And when you snort it, it goes up and hits your opiate receptors in your brain. And that means that it's kind of triggering something that's a little bit of a, an addictive association type of thing. And so I really do not recommend snorting anything, because you will hit those opiate receptors and it'll trigger something to do with that, that mechanism along with what it is that you're doing. So ketamine now, Yale University, Johns Hopkins, the top, universities and hospital systems and things have done studies with ketamine where they've shown that an intravenous drip of ketamine or an intramuscular shot or a lozenge that melts under your tongue of ketamine allows you to have the ketamine experience, but without triggering the opioid sensors.
Okay.
And it puts you, well, first of all, it's, been shown to break even treatment-resistant depression. The number one side effect is it breaks suicidal ideation. And so, it's got this weird reputation because people do use it recreationally, but it's also the number one anesthetic used by oral surgeons on children. When they operate on a child, they give them ketamine because it's fast acting, it doesn't affect your breathing, and it wears off super fast. So they're using it every day, doing procedures in the ER and everything like that. But what happened was the soldiers that were in the battlefield, they were getting amputations and they were giving them ketamine to amputate their arm or their leg, whatnot. And they realized that the people who were getting the amputations, who were getting ketamine, weren't committing suicide like the other people who were getting like ether or something like that to do the amputation. So they're like, what's going on here? They studied it, several thousand people they put through, and they realized that when you do ketamine in a low dose, it actually builds up new neural pathways in your brain when it metabolizes, and those new neural pathways can replace either broken ones, fix broken ones, and even give you, like a new set of pathways that are very positive. And so it's a game changer, the ketamine. I think it's, we're starting to get past the stigma that it got from, being used recreationally, but it's such an amazing compound. I'll just give you one other reference point. They say you have this area of your brain called the default mode network that you may have heard of. And that thing is always defaulting to either being worried or being creative. And some people, when they get alone or whatever it is, they default into worry. Some people can default into creativity. But that area of your brain, there's this mechanism that's called your lateral habenula. And the lateral habenula is recording all the stress you've ever had in your whole life. If it becomes too much, your brain goes into this burst mode. And when your brain's in burst mode, it cuts off all your dopamine production. And your dopamine is like your happiness, your motivation to do things. So when you're in burst mode, nothing feels good. You talk to people these days and they're like, I don't have any motivation. I'm just like, I can't even feel joy. I don't even believe that anybody's happy. The first time you do the ketamine, it takes the brain out of burst mode and you immediately start getting your dopamine back.
Now, how long do these effects last? Or how often do you have to probably, get have ketamine re-administered?
Yeah. So, the good news is once you take your brain out of burst mode, it's out and you're going to have your dopamine back. Ketamine is shown to be about 70% effective against even treatment-resistant depression. Nice. The protocol they came up with at Yale University was if you have treatment-resistant depression that nothing else works for, you're going to want to do 6 treatments over 2 to 3 weeks to build up enough new neural pathways, like a strong foundation. And then you would do 1 treatment maybe once every 3 or 4 months and just continue to build a little bit and strengthen that foundation. So it's a really, incredible thing, just the fact that it, breaks suicidal thinking immediately. And what happens there is that usually when you're going to kill yourself, it's like you either think I keep doing what I'm doing or I kill myself. Those are my only 2 choices right now. But when you do the ketamine, medical dose ketamine, and you're in that space that you're in for about 35, 40 minutes. In there, all of a sudden you see all these other options open up and you're like, oh, wow, like I like to do that, which could lead to that, which might even lead to that. You come out, you're like, I'm not going to kill myself. Like, this is so interesting. Like, there's something I have to pursue here. And there is more than just this and this. And, you know, and that's amazing, you know, to see people, you know, in such a state of just like the worst place they can be, to be in this very intrigued state is just like, it's amazing, you know.
Do a complete 180, it seems, pretty much.
Yeah.
No, this is so enlightening. And the crazy thing too is like the fact that there are so many different options to look into as you talk about plant-based medicine. I mean, I've just started microdosing psilocybin recently.
Awesome.
It was hard to get. Got scammed a few times online. You know,
Got it.
but I'm finally in the game now, and I do feel like it's working. The ayahuasca retreat, like we talked about, but even some of the deeper dive stuff, right? And how do you know what order to maybe try things? Because I mean, you can go far to the right and do like 5-MeO DMT. Which is also really hard to get, because that's what you know, when I started on this ayahuasca journey, I was trying to try DMT. And I was like, you know what? What if I did the most organic and original way that one can do it? Like, you know, do the dieta, you know what I'm saying? Do it in a religious space with a shaman and the whole nine. And I was so glad that I did it, because it's changed me. And even people that have listened to my podcast talking about it have gone just on the strength of my glowing, you know, my glowing endorsement of the practice and the process, and just seeing how it's helped so many people. So you have that. Then there's the there's what do they call that? Combo, which I've been hearing about. Iboga. The ketamine, which you just spoke about. So, and even going back to the DMT, which is there's 5-MeO DMT and regular DMT. What order should you seek these things out? Like, or what should you not try first?
Right. Well, you know, I mean, I gotta say, you know, coming back to like, it's really important to find a good psychedelic concierge, somebody who's a psychonaut who can kind of guide you, because, you know, some people need, you know, one or two things, and somebody else needs something completely different. It's just really like, what is your intent? What are you trying to get from this experience? And, you know, they're all beneficial. You know, it's kind of like, you know, it's, you go to, you know, boot camp, or you learn how to swim, and you're like, you're terrified, and then you're doing it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I know how to swim, like, or ride a bike or whatever. It's like everything that you don't know seems daunting, and like you might never get it right, but then you do it and you're just like, wow, that was worth learning to ride a bike. It was worth, you know, asking that person out on a date or whatever. It's like the scariest things are really, you know, very positive. And I think, you know, that's how I feel about the plants. You know, the thing I love about DMT is in everything. You know, it's in your sweatshirt, it's in my phone case, it's in my skin. You know, we all have DMT in everything. And so what you're doing is, you know, DMT is usually extracted from a plant that has a high level of DMT in it. So you're taking something that's very organic. It's like your body it's safer for your body to take some DMT from a plant than it probably is to drink a Diet Coke, you know, right. In the reality.
Really?
Yeah. And like, what I love is the DMT it's so fast. You're talking 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. So it's the kind of thing that you can, in an urban environment or even in a war zone or whatever it is, you could still have this psychedelic experience. You can have that aha moment, but without having to commit to, dieting, spending several hours and then a couple days, maybe, some of these things you got to integrate it back into your life. Well, the DMT is so fast, 15 minutes later, it comes out of you. It's like a frequency vibration. It's just like, whew, and it leaves the room and you're just like, almost feel like you had a lucid dream. You're like, wow, did that happen? Like, I think I remember one thing or two, but like, that's what I love about these things is they each have their own benefit. And, some people, the iboga, like you talked about, that's an African root that can break a heroin addiction in one 12-hour treatment, opiate addiction, crack addiction, alcohol, 2 packs of cigarettes, gambling, like whatever it is, you're going to go for this incredibly intense 12-hour introspective look at what you're doing in your life. And you are going to emerge out the other side in a much better mental state and a much better physical state. And I said to Lamar, I was like, hey, you know what? Now I know you and you've done the ketamine. I was like, look, you're an African-American guy. This is an African root. I was like, the iboga. I'm like, maybe you're supposed to be having this. You might have been cut off from this culturally. And I just think with your, addiction profile that you have, you got to go to iboga and see if you can like get this monkey off your back once and for all. And I don't know if you've seen yet. I shared the link, but I don't know if you saw the Lamar Odom Reborn movie yet.
I did.
But okay, cool. So you saw Lamar in that iboga. He heard his mother's voice, who passed away 25 years ago. He hadn't heard her voice in I don't know, maybe 30 years. He hadn't heard her voice. Just to hear your mother's voice, who passed away, is an incredible thing, And then he had this son who died at 6 months old. He got to see the son grow from 6 months old when the age where he passed away to be 8 or 9 years old, then to be the teenager that he would be today. And he's like, to spend time with my son, what's that worth? It's everything. And so he was like, yeah, I'm in a position now after this. This is what he was saying, where I want to tell everybody about this because we've all lost somebody. We all have trauma. And, here he is, about 3 years later, and, he's been able to maintain, despite his, crazy world that he lives in, to, be very in his own frequency and, just really resonating strong. And the cool thing is the iboga you saw in the movie, it does this physical reboot on you after it goes through your mental process. And Lamar came out 48 hours after he had done the ibogaine. He said to me and the people that were in the van, we were driving back to LA, and he's like, I think I can make a comeback in professional basketball. He's like, I feel that good mentally and physically right now. And his bodyguard was with us, his trainer, and the guy was like, Lamar, dude, take it easy, buddy. He's like, you need to work out 4 hours a day, and you can't be smoking weed. And Lamar's like, I know what I got to do. I'm going to do it. And the guy just all of a sudden he started training and working out and doing his thing. And despite the fact that he'd had 12 strokes and 6 heart attacks, he was able to make a comeback and play in a professional tournament in Dubai. And he said, in the movie, he said to me, Zappy's like, I'm not the player I used to be. I can't go play a season of NBA and travel all around and play. He's like, I'm 40 years old. I can't do that. But just the fact that I got to have my own personal rocky moment where I stepped back on the court and I, contributed to a professional team. He's like, I should be dead right now. How could I lose, And I just think that's the best,
To see where he was to where he is now, it's a phenomenal thing. And the power of the plant speaks volumes.